Hi, my name is Carrie Brownwolf, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about your horror unit and about writing and reading and banned books and all kinds of stuff. You've asked me some questions, and I'm an author. My first book was published a while ago. It was nonfiction, and it won a few awards. And since then, I've kind of changed what I'm writing about. So instead of writing nonfiction, I do some freelance work, which is nonfiction, but I'm writing books for middle grade and young adult, which is where I'm going to ask you some questions at the end because I'd really like your opinion on some things. And you can help me out because I'm actually working on a story right now that's not necessarily horror, but it is a thriller, and I'm kind of questioning how old I want my character to be, if it's too scary for middle school or not. So please tell me get to there. But I've lived in Summit County 20 years, and I've had 3 kids. 2 of them don't live here anymore because they're older and they're out. And I have a senior. And I teach at CMC. I do some editing and some other freelance work. So that's a little bit about me. But mostly, I wanted to talk to you about horror and about writing. And I've got a list of questions here, and I've got my handy dandy little high-tech note cards to answer some of your questions. And the first one is, do you feel that horror can inspire students to read stories? And I would say, yes, absolutely. I think all kinds of different things can inspire people to read. And whatever that is, whatever inspires you, do it so that you're reading. Because honestly, reading opens up all kinds of brainwaves and receptors, and I can get all sciencey and math about it, but I won't, because I'm also a student, and I continue to take classes and workshops myself where it comes to writing, and I've heard lots of really good information about what reading can do for not just your creativity, but all kinds of things. So if anything inspires you to be reading, then read it, including if that's horror or whatever it is. Read about skateboarding, or read about a magazine, whatever it is. Just go ahead and read it. And I also get asked, actually parents ask me more about this. They get concerned that their child is reading the same story over and over and over again. And I would say that's fine. If you love Harry Potter and you want to read it 1,000 times, go ahead and read it 1,000 times. And because every time you read it, you're going to discover something new that you didn't know before about character, about a plot, or something that will help you when you start to hear a different language, and just all those things will come into your head. So definitely just read whatever it is that you like to read, I would say, including horror. And I would say, let's see, do you think that reading horror could benefit kids writing or not? All writing is going to be improved by reading. And I cannot stress that enough. I know a lot of authors at this point, excuse me, and I will all say the same thing. I've never heard anyone not say that reading is going to improve your writing, and reading anything is going to, you'll start to hear different vocabulary, different tone, and everything. So anything that you read is going to help your writing. So absolutely to that one. Do you think the students should learn a wide variety of genres in middle school? I do, but just, that said, I also think that if all you want to read is about skateboarding, then go ahead and do that in your free time. But I do think school is there to open up, your eyes to different things that you might not do on your own. And there's great value in that, because you might not know that, hey, I really do like reading about horror. The movies scare me, but I like reading about it, so I'm going to read more about them. And you would have never known that, because if movies scare you and you never read one, then you wouldn't know. So I do think reading a wide variety of genres is a really good thing. The question about, do I like to write horror? I have not written horror before, but like I said, I'll ask you a couple questions at the end. It's more about thriller than horror, but I'm trying that a little bit right now. So we can get to that. Do you support or deny the thought of schools teaching a horror unit? Why or why not? And then that kind of leads me to talking a little bit about banned books. I am really against districts and libraries and people who ban books. It's a creative outlet for writers and for readers alike, and you should be able to have free choice about what you want to read and what you want to write. It's like having a painting on the wall. If you didn't, some people might like fish on their wall, and some people might not. It's your choice, and that's how I feel about reading books. And I'll share a story. I was at kind of I don't know if it was a meeting. It was a long time ago at a church, and it's a pretty conservative church. It was here in Summit County, and the pastor there was pretty conservative, and the discussion came about around Harry Potter, and at this time there were about 4 books, I think, 4 or 5 written, not all of them. She hadn't finished the whole series yet. And his daughter, he had asked me to work with his daughter to do some writing, and she was in, I want to say middle school, but I want to say like 6th grade, maybe 5th grade at the time. And I was concerned that he wasn't going to let her read Harry Potter, and we were in a group situation, and someone asked him, and he said, yes, absolutely. Of course I would want her to read it, because then we can talk about it. And I think that sums up everything. You know, regardless of where you fall on how you think about something politically or religiously or whatever it is, when you read something and then you talk with someone who doesn't like it or has an opposing point of view, you're able to at least come together with this context of having read at least something in common. And if you disagree about it, that's okay. I mean, not everyone likes the same art, the same religion, the same anything. So. But it's a safe way to actually talk about it and to explore your ideas. And she's able to explain things that she liked or didn't like about it. And then, he can, as both a pastor and a father, talk about what he believes about it. And, she's going to be able to decide if she's going to agree with that, as she becomes an adult later on. So I would, that's another reason why I really think reading a variety of things in school is a good place to do it, because you can have different ideas come to the board, and maybe learn something. You may not end up coming away thinking any differently. You may not come away agreeing with it, but you'll at least have some kind of something in common, which I think we could use more of right now. So I think it's a great way to get different ideas on the table and to discuss things. So now that said, I'm also a teacher, and because I'm also a parent, I do think there needs to be some responsibility with how you're going to present it and teach it and discuss it, because obviously some things are inappropriate, and that is off the table. That's something that's different. That's a whole different discussion. But I do think some kids are able to read some things that others aren't, and that's not a judgment call, and that's not right or wrong. It's just certain personality, and I'll share a couple other personal stories with my family. I've got 3 kids, and my oldest is at CU, and she's a junior at CU now. And she really read a lot when she was younger, and read a variety of things. She loved historical fiction. She did love horror. She loved, and she still loves reading. She doesn't have as much time, and I think in high school and college that gets harder because you're involved in lots of activities. But I think she'll get back to it. She certainly reads on vacation and things like that. But really, we didn't have many issues with her at school or at home with not wanting to read, or being afraid to read certain things, or not liking certain things. So she was kind of, an easy one. And some of you as students may fall into that category and be like, what's the big deal? And why wouldn't people just read that? And because she was definitely that way. But our youngest daughter, who's a senior this year, she was late to start reading, and just didn't love it, and was reading chapter books, but didn't really like to do it very much. And we were kind of getting a little concerned, because at this point she's getting I think it was 1st or 2nd grade, and she's just not really, where she probably, we thought maybe she should be for reading. And she saw a movie, and people ask me, do you think you should read a book first or see a movie first? And I always used to say, read it first and then watch the movie and see what you think. And this changed my entire thought process on that, because she saw Rick Warden's The Lightning Thief when it first came out and loved it. And started, asking all about mythology and, Greece and, the gods and goddesses and all of that, all of that stuff. And when I told her it was a book, she wanted to read it. I'm like, okay, you can read it, but, you're just kind of getting through Dr. Seuss. So are you sure you can, really want to, maybe in a year, and we'll get there. She's like, no, I'm going to read it now. She's really stubborn. So I'm like, okay, here's the book. You can give it a shot. And her dad was like a little bit more concerned, because he's like, she may start reading this and it's going to be way too hard. She's not going to know what some of the words mean. And then she's going to hate it. And she's going to hate reading for the rest of her life. And she shouldn't be reading this. So we went and we talked actually with a teacher. Miss Bolt, if any of you know Miss Bolt, and she was great. She was like, let's have her read it and give it a shot. And instead of reading, when you're supposed to read an entire book, for Olivia, it was like, let's read a whole chapter, or just read a chapter, because it took her a long time, because she had to look up words, didn't know what it was. And so, anyway, long story short, she did finish the book and loved it, and then read the rest of the series, and that, catapulted her into reading. So she went from reading, Dr. Seuss to The Lightning Thief, and it was a book that did that for her. And really, and if we had said no, or had said it was too hard for her, or too scary for her, or whatever, else, she may not have really ever picked up reading. So, and she is someone today who loves horror. I mean, she's in high school, so again, it's kind of hard to have time for a lot of reading on her own. But she does love horror, and she loves TV shows, and slasher movies, and scary things, all of it. And she can handle all of it. I personally can't. Some of it, I'm like, I have to walk out of the room. She can read anything and not be scared about it at all, or watching anything, and maybe she's scared, but it doesn't bother her. She's fine and can move on. So, she's very different in that way. My son, who's in between the two girls, is really the exact opposite, and he got really scared about, especially horror that could happen in real life, more contemporary issues. And he was reading a book once, and I think it was maybe 5th or 6th grade, and it really terrified him. And it was a true life story, which sometimes those are more horrific, often are more horrific than a slasher story. And he couldn't handle it. He threw the book across the room, and just kind of this meltdown. And we did talk with the teacher, and they talked it through, and how it would end, and how it would, we just had to work with him with that. And so he would be coming from a parent perspective. I would probably say, reading some horror for him, it would not be good. I mean, it would hurt his mental state. And so I think in terms of doing a unit, what's really important is, especially when there's controversial book titles or books that could scare, create nightmares, or trauma for a student, because books can trigger trauma as well, that there needs to be choice in the matter. So I really would suggest, if you're coming together as a classroom, you pick 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different kinds of horror books, and then the students can choose which ones they want to read. My son, to end that story, was required to read Frankenstein, which is really the original horror story, and I would suggest all of you read it. But because it was over 100 years ago, it didn't scare him in the same way. He loved it, actually. And so it's interesting, because his strong reaction to contemporary horror was so visceral and challenging, and something that he wouldn't choose to read. Classical, reading something that took place a long time ago, was okay. He had enough distance from it. So, if you do a unit on horror, I would say put Frankenstein in there. Frankenstein's a really good choice for students who, might not want to read something that's going to scare them at that time. And, you can also set up some guidelines, like, you read during the day, you don't read before bed. Those kinds of things can help if you're reading something that's really scary. I was one of those kids who I did like reading, when there was a thunderstorm, and I liked reading in the dark with a flashlight. And when I was a kid, it was Stephen King, and Stephen King is still an amazing writer and still around, but he was the only one really writing horror. Amityville Horror Story. That would be another one. I don't think he wrote that one. I'm going to have to look that up. Anyway, that was another one I remember. But I did like reading them, and I liked reading them as scary as it could be. And that was, but I read a lot of different stuff. So, but I think it kind of depends. If you're, really going to do a horror unit, that you offer some variety and choice. But then, the great thing about reading in a school environment is that you can come together and you can share, and some people can summarize, and then you're hearing about this horror story, but without having to have read it. And then it can be like, oh, maybe I will read that in a couple years when I feel like maybe I'm in a better place, or maybe not as scared, and I'll read it at that time. And then again, just sharing the different, what made it scary and what was horrifying about it, and those kinds of things. So I do think it's a great unit to do in school. So let me see what else I've got here for questions. I think I've covered most of the things with banned books and how I feel about that. Hoarder stories. When I was in middle school, yeah, it was. We did not have any kind of unit on anything like that. But well, that's not true. We read. I remember reading Edgar Allan Poe, so it was classical, and the Telltale Heart, and I read that in middle school, and that was scary. I remember that because I think we even like maybe someone like was reading it and like kind of thumping because it's like someone's under the floorboards, so someone was sort of knocking like that as we were reading some of it at school. So yeah, I guess in that sense we did, but it was more like classical, not there just wasn't the we just didn't have the variety that you guys have now. So we're lucky, and to read those stories. So yeah, that's I guess my really thoughts on reading banned books and reading horror and how you can do that responsibly and absolutely reading a wide variety and talking about a safe environment is terrific. So I think that's great. So I'm going to ask you for help for me because I am writing and I have to give a little bit of explanation about this because unless you know much about writing in the publishing world, if your character is 8 to 12 years old, it's considered middle grade fiction, and like Wonder would be in middle grade fiction. Early Harry Potters were middle grade fiction. So anything where the character is 8 to 12. Now that doesn't mean the reader needs to be 8 to 12 because some 6-year-olds may be mature enough and might be reading that. Some high schoolers. I read Wonder. So you don't have to be 8 to 12 to read those books. Now if you are reading something and you're 13 or if the character is 13 through 17, actually 13 through 18, it's considered YA, which is young adult. Young adult gets far more. Not only is the character that age in the range of that age, but usually the content is far more disturbing. So either there's there can be more drugs, there can be more sex, there can be more assault. There can be really really tough issues in YA that you don't find in middle grade so much. So there's a really big difference between the two. Now again, you can be 10 years old and read YA. It may even help you. You may find a topic that you want to read and work through that. So and not all of them are bad content or scary content at all. Some of them are fantasy. I would say the upper level, Harry Potter was definitely YA. There was a death in Harry Potter. I'm forgetting which number. I'm sure you guys know in the books. But J.K. Rowling got the progressively darker because Harry got older and the characters got higher money. They all got older, so she kind of ratcheted it up. And so you'll see in the books that they get a little bit darker. So that's the difference. And so from a publisher's point of view and from an author's point of view who's looking for a publisher to write their books, you have to be really clear about whether your book is going to be in middle grade or if it's going to be YA, because it's going to be how they shelf them at the library, and it's going to be how they market them, in the industry, and how they're going to promote them, and they take a look at other lists. And usually there's more YA out there than middle grade, and that's because a lot of adults read YA. So I think there's more YA out there. So my book is, and you can right now I've got a 12-year-old character. And I'm not going to share the whole story, but it does involve a kidnapping and involves some endangered animals, and also involves some racism and really bullying. That's pretty frightening, and it's kind of a survival story as well, and all of that mixed in together. So I workshopped it. So what writers do is they go to a workshop, or if they don't, I don't have my MFA. I have a master's, but not in writing. So what writers will do is they'll go to a workshop with other authors, and you read each other's work. Usually it's 3 chapters, maybe 50 pages approximately, and you kind of talk about it, and you see what's working and what's not, and then you go back and you rewrite it, and you work it, you send it to your critique partner. So for those of you who don't like it when your teachers tell you to revise something, I understand you, because imagine you're revising and rewriting something at least 100 times. Authors will rewrite and revise for 2 to 3 years, and that's like truly that's an average statistics. I know some published authors that that have been my teachers. who on some books have worked on something for 10 years. So, 2 to 3 years is really average that you're going to be working and reworking and reworking and I think I just stopped there, and revising. So anyway, that's where I'm concerned about, because in my group, 8 of them loved what I was working on. There were 2 who thought that I should make it YA because it was a little bit maybe scary and wanted me to ratchet it up, which does mean changing the character and the tone age by at least 3 years. So she'd go from 12 to 15. It kind of changes the dynamics of everything. So that's a big revision for me to do that. And then there was one woman who thought that I shouldn't have the racism piece, that it was too scary for kids. And my feeling is the world out there that's the way to help process through some of that, and how someone can come through something in a successful way would be good to have some of that out there. So I guess my question to you is, do you think that, given the brief sort of information I've given you about what I'm working on, would that be too scary for you as a middle school student to read about someone who was kidnapped by someone who's basically like a neo-Nazi? So anyway, if you have any ideas on that, I'd like to hear them. I do think there's very little of that in middle grade, which is sort of why I wanted to write it at that age level. But I am considering making it YA and changing it all. So let me know what your thoughts are. I would appreciate that. If you have more questions about what it is to be an author and what the process is, and more about writing, feel free to reach me anytime, and I'm, available, at CMC, and you can email me, and I'm happy to ask questions or come back and talk more about writing if you need to. But anyway, good luck, and don't get too scared reading your horror stories, but read them and talk about them and have a good time. And then read, whatever makes you happy, just read. It's really one of the best things that you can do for yourself. And you'll find something that you love. I promise you, even if you think you hate reading, there's something out there for you that you're going to love. And so read that and have a good time with it, and then read more. Okay, bye.